Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com. Thank you for joining this Community IT Podcast Part 2. You can find Part 1 in your podcast feed if you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome, everyone who's joining us to the Community IT Innovators webinar using Microsoft Teams at nonprofits. Today, we will provide a mini case study from nonprofit practitioner guests from Housing Alexandria, so you can learn from your peers' experiences.
My name is Elisa Mondragon. I am the Vice President of Operations here at Housing Alexandria. I oversee strategic operations for the entire business, corporate management, leadership, coaching, finance, HR, resident services, or IT. So a little bit of everything. And I've been with the organization for 6 years. And throughout my tenure here, I have helped guide the transition work from more of a startup board-led organization to a sustainable company that can serve Alexandria for years to come.
My name is Alessandra, or Allie Brolin, and I joined Housing Alexandria as an operations associate in last November. I support our business operations through tasks like scheduling, calendar management, file management, and stocking the office with snacks and supplies. Lots more stuff as well. I also assist Elisa on major projects like our upcoming move to a new office. And I'm very happy to be here to talk about Teams, which I have found useful in a lot of my work, including the examples that I just gave.
Hi, I'm Courtney Carroll. I am the Centralized Services Manager with Community IT.
Okay, so next we are going to turn it over to Housing Alexandria. So Elisa and Alessandra, would you like to take us through your case study of how you chose Teams and then some little tips on how you're using it?
Yeah, happy to do that. Thank you so much. So I wanted to start with where we as an organization were before we were using Teams, before we were using SharePoint. So prior to January of 2020, we used a shared drive, which we accessed via VPN to store all of our files and work collaborative. We had in-person meetings. I think everyone prior to the pandemic was used to going to people's office, have visitors, collaborate in person. We used a third-party conference call line. So it was just like a free conference call line, or we would just call each other. And then we also had a physical water cooler for team building, catching up, shows, etc. We had a lot of challenges accessing our files via VPN when we were working remotely. We wouldn't work remotely very often, but when we did, accessing our files via VPN caused a lot of problems. And we actually explored other solutions that were not Microsoft to do file sharing. But one of the benefits of working with Community IT and, having a dedicated IT professional was that they were able to tell us like, hey, you're actually already paying for this. This is part of your Microsoft license. And so we dropped everything else and we decided to make the transition from the VPN and this other source to SharePoint right at February of 2020, which was very serendipitous. All of this happened and then the pandemic happened and we had to push even further. So the transition into SharePoint really allowed us to be able to explore additional services that Microsoft offers. So one of the main reason we chose Teams was because it does work so collaborative, so cohesive with SharePoint. We save everything on SharePoint or OneDrive. We don't have any more physical files. Everything lives online. And the fact that we're able to access everything so easily through Teams and any other Microsoft tools like Word or Excel or anything else like forms that Microsoft has been really, really useful for us. As Ali mentioned, it really has helped us with our hybrid work structure, so then we're able to move our work as we need to. One of the changes that we did make is that with a regular license, we don't have a call-in number. So maybe that's a challenge that some of you are facing, that people don't want to use Teams or called, is you have to pay a little bit extra to get a dial-in number. So I highlighted here. As we were transitioning early in the pandemic, people were still figuring out how does Teamworks, WebEx, Zoom, all of the other options. So having a dial-in number made it easy for those people to access it. And since then, we've kept it because we work with a lot of community members that don't have access to the internet, may have never used the internet themselves. So, this creates a more inclusive environment where people have various different options to join a team meeting. But another reason that we really like using Teams is because it helped us stay connected and have this virtual water cooler. We're able to have share memes and pictures of kids, etc. So it's really important for our culture and values that our team members feel like we're accessible to everyone. Any entry-level team member can reach to a more executive-level team member with a quick chat. There's additional options. Sometimes when you go to a leadership's office, it feels like you're going to the principal's office. So you try to avoid it, or, asking questions. You're like, oh my gosh, I should know the answer to that. But Teams chats creates that ability to be able to communicate a lot easier without having to write an email or a phone call every single time. So one of the benefits that we really, really like Teams for is because it reduces the email content. There's a saying that we have in the office, which is it's a meeting that could have been an email that could have been a chat message. So trying to reduce those and trying to, again, get clarifications about a project, deadlines, who do you want to include in an email? It just makes it a lot ease of communication. You can set your messages as important or urgent if you need someone to answer you, quicker. Sometimes you just need the green light of something, that person's on a meeting or somewhere else. So that makes it a lot easier. You can also tag the person if you are in a group chat. So let's say that you have 6 other people and you need, Jane to answer. You can add that person and make sure that that person is able to get an additional notification that they need to respond to your comment. As we keep saying, it really is a collaboration tool, and it helps us keep continuous records of meetings or work that we're doing. So, we can have 3 different chats with 6 different people going on at the same time, but our thoughts are being organized because all of the content for one particular topic is kept in that chat together. One of the challenges that we've noticed is that there's an overwhelming source of notifications. And again, that might be another reason why people are not using Teams or are resisting. So a good way of trying to avoid that is to help set guidelines and boundaries for your team to turn off the work, and for you to commit as well on what you have said. So, for example, if your little bubble is red, just make sure that you are telling your team members, don't message me unless it's urgent. But you shouldn't do that as well, because otherwise they're going to think that everything is urgent. So make sure that whatever boundaries that you set, you follow them as well. As Carolyn mentioned, you can set snooze hours, do not disturb, after 6 o'clock on the weekends. And again, try to reduce those notifications, because sometimes it can get very overwhelming. And that's why people just completely turn it off and don't want to even address it because it's just too much. So again, another challenge is getting everyone to use the platform. That's something that we hear all the time, and many of you have commented. So try to coach your team on the appropriate use of Teams. First, I want to make sure that you are checking with your leadership and your HR team. Set the boundaries on hey, if you have an HR request or, requesting time off, don't do that on Teams unless your HR approves it, because, hey, I asked for that day off and you saw it, but, what's going on here? Try to avoid all of that. So setting those standards and guidance is really important at the beginning. But another really good way of implementing Teams is start small. You don't have to make all of the changes all at once, because that's usually where you get more of a resistance. If you start small with a small task, small project, people are able to dabble, get a little bit more used to it, and see the value that they're adding, that Teams is adding to their work, and are more likely to have a buy-in. So another good practice is to tie your success metrics to it. So if you want to go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about a specific case. So as Ali mentioned, we are moving offices. So one of our success metrics is that we as a team that is in charge of moving our office is, are you using this to-do list? Are you communicating in the chat? Are you, following through? And if you're not, then, we want to make sure that we're correcting that action. But it's a little bit more digestible when this is the only project that they have to follow it, and everything else they might be able to continue to do whatever works best for them. So this to-do list that Ali put together is really, really useful. It's easy for all of us to access and to edit. The app is so friendly when we're, moving from the office, home, or whatever else we might be working. We can access and view the charts, schedules, assign, track progress all on our phones, but we can also, of course, do it on the desktop as well. One of the greatest things about this is that you don't have to have meetings for every single time you want to update. You can just log in, again, tag someone, just kind of follow the conversation on a particular topic on a bucket. So then it reduces the amount of time that you have to be, meeting with each team member. Another tip that we have is that don't feel like you need to create this at the beginning of your project. We started meeting about our office move and collecting information and data and, all of the material. And once we started having the need to be more organized, everyone was like, yes, this is a great answer because we can see everything together. So again, sometimes the need may need to come before the idea, because then more people will start seeing the benefits and the value that it's adding to your project and your organization. And they're more likely to share that success in other parts of their work. Go to the next one.
We had a quick question that came in on the chat, which is the slide that you're sharing now. Is that an app within Teams, or can you talk a little bit about that's just in Teams, right?
Yes. So Ali, do you want to take that one?
Sure, yeah. So this is a list that I created. So I was in the Teams app, but it did prompt me which program I wanted to use to create this. So it's also Microsoft Planner, which is part of the Microsoft Office suite. So I didn't have to go to the Planner app to do this, but I chose Planner as the way that I was creating this to-do list. And then it's using the formatting that Planner comes with to do the different buckets and then items in each bucket. But it lives in Teams. So I can open up my Teams and go to our strategic plan channel, the team channel. And then one of the files at the top of the bar there, one of the tabs is this list, and it's the office move to-do list. And then it has everything structured the way Planner structures things.
So some other uses that we've had with Teams is capacity building. It's a lot easier for some of our team members to, again, use Teams when they start seeing what other options they have. They'll start using it more for their meetings or for their projects. One really good option that has started, it was this supply request, because it's so intuitive. People always have the same information. They usually would email it or fill in an Excel sheet, but we created a supply request directly on Teams, and everyone just knows that's where they go and where they use it. So again, just creating more processes on Teams and putting it in as a first option for your organization, then more people are going to think that's the first thing I should start with. So we used it to improve processes. That includes our onboarding and offboarding process. So when a new team member starts, that's the first thing that they see is, oh, we're using Teams. They're already in a transition phase, so they're more likely to adapt to it. Another tip is to collect employee feedback through a form, which can also be distributed to teams. as I mentioned, we use it a lot to remove barriers in communication. We want to make sure that our team feels like they can have this virtual open door policy. So when we create more forms, and we can do this from, hey, what kind of color would you prefer for our new office walls, to employee feedback, satisfaction, then again, they're starting to get used to the continuous use and repetitiveness of Teams. And then we also discover a lot of things just by playing around with Teams. We encourage a lot of our team members. There's a little icon that I put here on the bottom on your chat. There's an option for sending praise, you did a great job. There's an option for requesting a more official check-in on a project. You can link your Adobe sign and have documents signed through it and saved in your Adobe. So there's a lot of different options that maybe not all of them work for you, but if you play around, there might be one that you're like, oh, actually, this is a great option for me at this moment. One of the things that we continue to ask is, how can we build capacity? How can we reduce costs? So Teams is really a tool that you can use every day that has the ability to increase capacity and plan for the future. So probably the one thing that we use Teams the most, other than chats and meetings, is this screen sharing feature, which when we discovered, it was a game changer. So if you go to your chat on the top right corner, I highlight it under the red. So when we are meeting in person, instead of having to pull up our TV or screen or anything, we can just share the screen also without joining a meeting. And we really wish we would have known this before we spent all this money buying big TVs so we can share screens, because it turns out that we can just do it on our own computers without joining a meeting. So if you are trying to reduce costs, you don't have the space for a TV, you also are very mobile, maybe in a coffee shop, and you want to share screens and you don't want to sit super close next to each other, this is a really good feature that we use a lot. The Teams voice line, so we use our phones completely on Teams, and this was really helpful. We used to use Comcast, but the app was not user-friendly whatsoever. The space, the hardware, we just never used it. We weren't in the office. We could use the extra space in, reducing the hoteling when people were sharing spaces. But also there was a cost with renting the equipment. This was just so much easier. The app is super user-friendly. We can reassign phone numbers when a team member leaves. And the best thing is we have the do not disturb time. Again, reducing those notifications has been really helpful for our team to have more valuable work-life balance, so they have a stronger buying into Teams. And the last thing I wanted to say was, really try again with Teams. We have tried several things at different times with different projects, and they don't always work out, but that doesn't mean that they might not work in the future. So, just because it didn't work for you in the past or in the particular project doesn't mean that it can't work for you or other team members in the future. So keep exploring, and hopefully you can find a use for Teams in the near future.
Thank you so much. This is a great rundown. We got a bunch of questions coming in about phones and your experience. So I wanted to go back over our learning objectives that we wanted to learn about Teams and what it can do. I think we can check that off. I mean, we've scratched the surface, I think, in some ways, but it's just definitely such a valuable, useful tool. So we gave you a little bit of some of what it can do. Learning tips on how to use Teams better beyond chat. Which is kind of the gateway, it's like you open up Teams your first time and you're like, oh, I can, chat to this colleague or, ask my supervisor something. And then I think that's a good advice, for complicated tools in general, is to start small and then keep adding on. And as you said, Elisa, to keep experimenting and seeing what's available. And sometimes I'm like, what does this button do? What happens if I do that? And different things that you can attach to it. And I love your idea of trying things a second or third time. I know I tried to use the whiteboard, Microsoft Whiteboard, about a year ago. And I was like, and then I had a colleague using it just a couple months ago. And I was like, wow, this is a lot better than I remember it. they had changed some of the features and made it more user friendly. So I definitely love that tip. And then I thought you did a great job of going over how to select a Teams type tool and why some of these features made it really attractive to your organization and maybe to some of the other organizations that are out there that are thinking about using it on this webinar, or maybe have started using it and might want to invest like in the phone, the additional cost to have the phones. So I think that was great. Okay, so I wanted to make sure to thank you, and we have some time for questions. And I know we have Courtney on as well. She's answering some of the questions of the more technical things on the background. But someone had a question for Housing Alexandria. Did you have a Teams consultant helping you explore these different features and kind of maximize your effectiveness using it, or did you figure it out yourself?
We used a lot of YouTube. That was our consultant. We played around a lot, and we just Googled a lot of things and watched a lot of YouTube videos. I actually think that Microsoft has really good examples and tools that they help us with, but YouTube has been our best friend when trying to figure things out.
No, I love that. It's like a lot of nonprofits have that do it yourself attitude, and then trying to find time to prioritize and make enough time to spend on the project to get it really working at your organization. Clearly, this is giving you benefits that make it worth the time that you have spent figuring out how to use it the best way and tailoring it to the way that your organization uses it. So that's really helpful. There's a question: can you include attendees in Teams meetings if they don't have Microsoft 365?
Yes, you can definitely include attendees. The only challenge there is that they might not be able to access the information afterwards. So like the chat history, if they don't have Teams, they wouldn't be able to access it afterwards, but they can definitely join and participate once they're in the call.
Yep, that makes sense. I mean, you can add people like with a Gmail account or other email accounts. It's just someone had asked that as well, as like, how do you use Teams outside of your organization? It's super easy. You just invite them to a meeting and then you go from there. They get an invite and they click on it and there you are.
Yeah.
So we had a question of, have you been able to save the cost of Zoom licenses by using Teams instead? So, or you were talking about your previous phone, what you were using for your phones. Did you see any savings, or is it convenience, or how did that work?
So as far as Zoom licenses, we still have one when we need to have like large webinars. We do a lot of work with the community. So sometimes when we need to have like 300 people in a call, we'll just do Zoom. But we only need to have, one Zoom license instead of one for every single team member. And then with the phones, we really saw the value of our dollar being used there. Because even though Comcast was maybe a little bit less expensive, our team members were so frustrated with that they just were using their personal phone numbers. So sometimes, the value is in, are people using it and are they getting the benefit, and again, an added value to their work. So that's how we recognize that. But with the Zoom and WebEx and any of those other ones, we can use the free version if we needed to, but everyone pretty much uses Teams.
We have another question about the voice services, the calls. Have you found it reliable? Like, does it drop calls? Is it some voice over IP services have difficulties? So have you had any problems with it?
I haven't. Ali, I know you use it more because Ali screens all of our phone calls. So have you had any different experiences?
No, I haven't had any issues with dropped calls or weird service or anything like that. I have noticed like sometimes when a call comes in, it rings on my phone because I have the Teams app and on my laptop. And sometimes those are out of sync with each other, which is sort of funny. So I'll answer it on my phone and it's like still ringing on my laptop. But the person on the phone can hear me and it just, the laptop catches up. And it always asks that like at the end, like, how was your service? And it's always fine.
Yeah, I think I've heard that as well. I mean, it's comparable to other services, and then it just has this extra feature of being really convenient if you're already using Teams. So we have another question about the phones. Does the phone system allow for a main line that will separate out like a normal phone system, and does it cost you another license? They're also trying to go from Comcast to Zoom, but they may also be doing Microsoft 365. So just a quick question about, I think it's pretty sophisticated about being able to handle, like the things that having a main line and then having a directory and having maybe follow-on calls, like it can ring through to your cell phone, it can ring through to a different phone, it can do a lot of different things like that. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so it definitely can have a main line if you want. It really just depends on your preference. So Allie is the one that screens all of our calls, but we didn't want her to be the main line be her phone number. So she has an additional license. So that was our choice. You don't have to do it. You can have, like, if you have a receptionist, the main line is their phone number. Teams actually also sells phones. We don't have physical phones on any of them, but if you wanted to do like the receptionist, you can also have a physical phone in your office. Otherwise, just your computer or your cell phone works. And yes, so when you dial our phone number, you get an attendant. You can, click the extension or select option 1 for Elisa, or, it has all of those same features that are traditional. And I know in Comcast, if that's what you're using, it has all of the exact same features. It even sends us an email with a transcript of voicemails, and it's really helpful.
That's great. Thank you. So there have been a bunch of questions. There's another question that came in. Did you do formal Teams training versus hands-on learning on your own training? I know you talked a little bit about some tips to get everyone on your team using Teams, but maybe could you talk a little bit more about specifically, did you do like sit down trainings with people? Do you have trainings when you onboard new staff? Like, how does that work?
I'm going to defer that one to Allie, because she's taking over all of our orientation and training, and I know she has some plans there.
Yeah, it's sort of a combination. We have sort of a sit down training to go over SharePoint, OneDrive, kind of all the software that we use to explain like logistically how they work and also culturally how we use them. And then there's also, when someone is new, there's sort of that informal level of training too, where the last person that we had join us in his like first couple of days, he was like, when am I supposed to team someone? When am I supposed to email them? And I was like, if it's something you would like knock on their door and like say it to them really quickly, then that's a Teams chat. If it's something that you would need to have a more formal conversation on, that's an email. So, you kind of ease into it also just checking in with people, but we do include it in our new employee onboarding along with the other software stuff.
That's great. Thank you. I think we've got time maybe for one more question. And there's actually, I'm going to combine a couple of different questions and some stuff that you've talked about already, but a lot of questions around this, getting everyone to use it. So one is, how do you keep the less techie people in your organization motivated to learn and use Teams? And how do I wean staff from Zoom because we don't have to pay extra for Teams? So I think both of those are kind of questions about how do you get people together using Teams? And I know you've talked a little bit about it before, but do you have any kind of last words of wisdoms of tips you can try?
Do you want to start, Allie, and then I can follow up?
Sure, yeah. I would say, as we've said, it's kind of the small buildup, getting people comfortable with it. A specific example of that I found when I started with Housing Alexandria and I was new to Teams is the informal calls. We have sort of an informal policy of we don't have our cameras on. If you're doing an internal meeting, if it's like Wednesday, I'm working from home and I'm just like, Elisa, can I get on the phone with you really quick and ask you about this thing? It's like normal that it's expected. We're both cameras off that whole time. And I have found that mitigates the fatigue from being on online meetings so much. So I think that's a pretty big incentive for transitioning people. If you can do it in that, maybe your big team meetings are still Zoom are still like big, long meetings are more formal in Zoom. But if you get people kind of comfortable with the informal stuff, I think that it can be shorter meetings, it can be cameras off, and those things will make them enjoy being on Teams and then be more familiar with the whole platform. And then you can transition like more and more stuff into Teams. And I would also say kind of what we were talking about with the office move, where we have that to-do list. That's something that we introduced like in the middle of that project. So finding places where someone wants more organization and then introducing Teams as a new tool there, I think can like get the ball rolling on that kind of thing. And I think it's just keep it small over time. And then Elisa has some good ideas on this also.
Yeah, I think just to add to that is making Teams like the first option. So we added the add-in to all of our Outlook email. And when you schedule a meeting and you click add invite, it automatically makes it a Teams meeting. So it's just like a second nature to us. Like yes, Teams meeting immediately. We have to take extra steps to make it a Zoom or any other type of meeting. So that's been really helpful, is putting Teams as the first option. And people tend to default to the first option and then make changes somewhere else. But I think everything that Ali said, I would just echo starting small and, making it a little bit more comfortable for people to be in the space, and more people are going to choose it. But the last thing is sometimes it's accessibility issues. I would recommend maybe talking to your team members. Why are they like, is there an additional reason? You saw all my images, they're all in dark mode. It just helps with my vision a lot better. Maybe people don't know how to do that. Again, maybe the notification. So maybe it's not necessarily Teams that they have a challenge with, is something else there. So, asking your team members, maybe creating a forms via Teams and sending it out to collect some of that data. There might be additional reasons that, maybe we haven't even thought about, and just someone has challenges with it. So definitely keep the conversation open with your team and see what they have to say.
That makes sense. And I think another probably big piece of it is that you're in a leadership position and you're on Teams. So it's like that's where people are going to find you. So when you have leadership who are championing it and using it, like really using it, then I think that also helps other people come along if that's where they can chat with you and just get a quick question answered, for sure. Thank you, Elisa and Alessandra and Courtney, for joining us. Thank you so much, Housing Alexandria, for sharing these tips with us and spending as much time as I know you did on the slides in this presentation. Really appreciate it. And I think it was just so helpful for all of the people on the webinar today to see how other nonprofit practitioners are using this tool. So I really thank you so much. Thanks again.
Thank you for joining this Community IT Podcast Part 2. You can find Part 1 in your podcast feed if you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.